That was a little abrupt of an ending, but
my apologies. I was trying
no, it's
to get
okay.
it over.
Laura, you're great. So we have many people still joining the meeting, which is typical. So I just want to offer a beginning of a welcome. My name is George Smith, and I'm an Episcopal priest, and I serve at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Glen Ellen, Illinois, in the United States. And this is a joy to host this meeting, this retreat. And I'd like to now introduce Joe Kilikeevich, and for him to say a few words. And Joe, if you would unmute yourself and make sure we can hear you.
Mute. Okay. How's that? Okay.
That's good. We can see you and hear you, Joe.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be with old friends and new friends. This is different from the way those of us who've been together before on this prayer, but doing this prayer with Sadi, or known by many of you as Neil. It's good to have you and good to be with you today. It's a real privilege, and to have so many of you too joining us. So thank you for coming. One thing I just want to urge you at the very beginning of the day, what we're trying to do today, we used to do it for like a whole week's worth of retreat, which is a different from just the 3 hours that we have to be able to be together today. But allow yourself to simply be open to receive whatever message you need to receive for today. I call these the blessings that come from this kind of experiences. They're kind of time released. You might be surprised to find that, well, I'll never remember all of this stuff. You probably won't, but let go of trying to remember, and all of a sudden, a week later or something will come back to you from what happened today. So allow yourself to simply be open to receive the blessing that you're meant to receive. So thank you for joining us.
I would like to introduce Neil, but before I do that, there have been a couple questions that have come up. And just so everybody knows, the music that you've heard is available, and it will be sent in a link to everybody to your email. And also, this entire retreat is being recorded, and you will also have a link to that recording. And those will both be sent in an email after the retreat is finished. So Neil, now to you.
Thank you, George. It's good to be back. Back with Joe, with whom I've done a lot of work, and also virtually back in Illinois, which is where I was born, in the southwest suburbs, but we won't mention that. So Joe and I started many of these early retreats. I would say they were key to developing some of this experiential work with the Aramaic Jesus at a retreat center in Plano, Illinois, which is again in the West, the Great West. Anyway, so without further ado, welcome to all of you. And I see many folks I've seen over the years, and some I haven't seen for many years. So welcome to you all.
Now, Joe, we turn it to you to begin our program.
Okay. So Shem Center for Interfaith Spirituality was founded during the 1993 Parliament of World's Religions. And we've been going ever since with this message of bringing peace into the world through interfaith understanding and friendship and cooperation between all peoples of the world. And so that's simply put what our mission is. And we always begin with what I call a circle of respect. It's a very simple ritual that we created some time ago. And it has to do with making sure that everyone who shows up knows that they're welcome, that no one is left out, no one is excluded for any reason. And so you showed up, and we're glad that you're here. We want to make sure that you know that you belong. So that wonderful sense of belonging is really important. And we want to establish that now. So we ordinarily would do this standing in a circle, and there's some gestures that we would be doing and so forth, which is, of course, difficult to do in this particular format, but we'll see what we can adjust in order to make sure that you have the sense of belonging to a circle of people. There are over 200 of us, I understand, in this retreat, so that's a pretty large circle. It would probably be concentric circles if we had the space for it somewheres. But anyway, invited to begin with what is common to all traditions, to all peoples, to all spiritual paths everywhere, is simply our breath. We just start with our breath. I'm going to have you take a moment to place your hands on your heart and simply take a deep breath in and out. And now breathe in and simply say yes to the gift of life.
Yes to the gift of life.
And as you breathe out, say thank you. Breathe in and say yes.
Joe, you accidentally muted yourself. Sorry. Joe, if you can hear me, you need to unmute yourself. I'm sorry.
Could you not hear anything I just said?
If you could, the first breathing in and the thank you, we heard that. If you could start from there.
Okay. So if you take your left hand and place it with your palm facing the sky and acknowledge the universe that is above us and around us. Think of a time when you've seen the starry night perhaps in a place away from the light pollution of cities so you can actually see the stars at night. And know that we belong to that story. We are literally made of stardust. This is who we are. We weren't beamed here from some other planet. We grew up out of this planet. We belong to the stars. And leaving that left hand facing the sky, take your right hand and place it with your palm facing down. And use this gesture to acknowledge this sacred earth. Think of everything you love about being here. It's mountains, rivers and streams, oceans, flowers, trees, animals. Everything you enjoy about this wonderful planet. And know that you belong not only to the stars above us, you belong to the earth. We are all earth women and men. We belong here. Take a moment to realize that. And then open your eyes and look into the camera of your computer and bless anyone else that's looking at you through their computer. Bless one another with your eyes. We'll say more about this a little bit later. But give a blessing with your eyes. Just look with blessing upon one another. And we bless the diversity that gathers today. Whether you're a woman or man, young or in your wisdom years, well or ill, wealthy or poor, no matter what your sexual orientation may be or how you name your spiritual path or your faith tradition, you belong. And we're glad you're here. And you are welcome. And one more time, take a deep breath in and say yes. And breathe out and say thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So, Neil, I guess it's your turn to come to us with your message.
Thanks, Joe. That was lovely. Just like being back in the circle again.
Yes.
Today, we're going to be taking a quick but contemplative journey through Jesus's prayer. And I'd invite you to think about it more like you might do if you enter a circle that's singing the Taizé music, that there will be chant, there will be intoning words. We have a contemplation after each line, and then we move on to the next. And I'll say just a few words of introduction. I'll attempt to make the pronunciations of the Aramaic as clear as possible, but just to allay any concerns, as Joe mentioned, you may, if you're new to this, you may remember something, you may not remember something. Trust that your heart remembers the feeling. If you find that you're drawn to learn Jesus's prayer, the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, there are easy ways to do that. And I think the easiest way is you go to our Abun Network website, and there's a place where you can click on some links and hear each line of the prayer and just keep clicking. And after a month or so, you'll have learned the prayer if you spend 5 minutes a day with it. Or there's a MP3 or CD, all that stuff. If you really get curious about what's behind all of this, where did this version come from? Who does it? I would encourage you to look at my book, The Hidden Gospel. And that will at least answer about 90% of your initial questions. But suffice it to say that we're chanting words of the prayer that are in the Paschita Syriac version of the Bible, which is used by all Aramaic Christians today, of whatever denomination they may be. And some Aramaic Christians are aligned more with the Orthodox Church, some more with the Catholic Church, and some are independent and have been since the 3rd or 4th century. So that's as much history as you need to know. Aramaic Christianity does survive in the world today. It's not limited to little villages that occasionally journalists go to. It is actually not only in the so-called Middle East, but throughout the world. And I know that Chicago in particular has a large Assyrian Aramaic Christian community on the north side, because I visited there once, and you can find in a local grocery store an Aramaic yellow pages, if you want, of the local barber and butcher, and or if you're vegan or whatever. So Aramaic Christianity is alive. I wouldn't say it's surviving, as all ancient languages, even languages like Welsh do. It's difficult to interest the younger generation in learning an old language, a traditional language, when they're living in another culture. So for instance, Chicago, I suppose the kids want to learn how to speak Chicago, rather than Aramaic, but hopefully they learn to pray the prayer in Aramaic. Now, the other thing that's helpful to know is that each of the words in Aramaic, and this is true of all ancient Semitic languages. When I say Semitic, I mean languages like ancient Egyptian, Babylonian, Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, that is you could say whatever Hebrew, say Moses spoke, and it's not necessarily what's spoken in the synagogue today. Aramaic, the Aramaic spoken by Jesus and all the people at his time, and also Classical Arabic. These are all Semitic languages, as they're called. All of them, when the words are spoken by a prophet, by a holy person, by a mystic, the language lends itself to being taken in multiple levels or different layers. This is not metaphysics. This is not any particular complex mysticism. This is, I would say, from my research now, just an artifact of the way languages evolved in nomadic cultures, that is before agriculture, that people saw reality. They not only saw it, but they felt reality itself connected, just like that body prayer that Joe led us into. We are always connected with the earth. We are beings of the earth, so to speak. Our bodies participate in that. We couldn't survive without a spacesuit if we were divorced from the earth and raised, 100 miles up. But at the same time, we come from elsewhere. And there was embedded in the language an understanding that the two worlds, if we want to call them two, are actually linked. They're linked together. We can distinguish one from the other, but they're always, you could say, meshed together. And that's an important distinction. You could say, because now we live in a world where cultures where it's all about either or. Well, it's either this or it's either that. It's either good or it's bad. But even in most ancient cultures, we find this sense of, okay, there's different ways of being, different ways we can feel ourself in relationship, but that doesn't mean they're entirely separate. It doesn't mean our spiritual life is separate from our everyday life. And this is the simple understanding from which Jesus and the biblical prophets lived their lives and gave their messages. What Aramaic allows us to do is to pray with the sounds that Jesus used, with the breaths, you could say, with the body awareness that Jesus would be close to what Jesus may have had, and perhaps to re-enter his way, his feeling of prayer, his way of being in the world and being, you could say, not of the world at the same time. Being, you could say, very much here and now, concerned about the everyday life needs, the healing people, food and drink, feeding people. And at the same time, as he says, part of me was existing before there was even Abraham, all the way back to the first beginning. So with that as the prelude, let's get right into the prayer. And in this first segment, we're going to take a bit of I would say, probably the most important line, if you're only going to learn a little bit of this today, which is the first line of Jesus's prayer. And this is the line usually translated, "Our Father, which art in heaven." So hopefully some of you have downloaded the the word sheet for this, and others of you may have it from previous gatherings we've had off and online. The words are simple. There's actually fewer words than in English. In English, we have Our Father, which art in heaven, depending on which version you're using in English. In Aramaic, we only really have 2 words and a couple of prepositions at the beginning of the second. And so it sounds like this. Awun. Awun. This is one of the, you could say, the particles of Awun pointing toward the source, towards the parenting, the mothering, the fathering of all, not necessarily a being sitting somewhere separate from us, but a creation, a constant process of creation that's always going on within us and around us if we open our eyes and allow them to see, as Jesus said, or have the ears to hear. Awun. 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 Let's chant that just a little bit, and then we'll finish that line and chant it a little bit with some melody. So we want to take the sounds very slowly, let them roll around within us. Don't worry about how you sound, because I'm actually going to mute all of you. No, so that no one accidentally turns on their mic while we're chanting, and the recording for others is spoiled. So just feel your heart. As Joe was mentioning in the original attunement, place one hand gently over your heart for these chants, these body prayers, and so that our attention always goes more to the heart center and drops down out of the head. So body awareness more here. You can't really see me because of my camera, but anyway, you get the general idea. So we're going to intone the sound very slowly, open to the sound. You can close your eyes or have your eyes open, it doesn't matter. It's around us and it's within us at the same time. So the source, is coming to birthing in us. That BW sound. And then the sound of the breath that connects us inside, outside, that which we see of reality and that which we can't see. We could associate that with the more than 90% of the cosmos that physicists can't explain today. The dark matter, the dark energy. I mean, there's a lot that we don't know about. So connect with a sense of wonder, of awe. And then the N sound resonates both in the heart and in the head. And so hopefully when we open our eyes anew, we can see anew, or smell, sound, smell, hear, touch, taste anew, with this sense of Awun all around us. You know, the whole of the prayer is in the first word, really. So feel free to tone with the note I'm doing, or just do one that feels right to you. I've got my harmonium on. I don't know if that'll help or not. let's simply allow the sound to resonate within us, the remainder, the echoes of the sound in our breath. So we breathe the sound. When I say breathe that sound, I mean we feel those open sounds rolling around within us. And those sounds in our breath, in our awareness of our breathing, connecting us to the source and connecting us to the being, to the person who spoke these words a while back. Amen. Amen. Okay. Let's chant a little bit now with the whole part of the first line, the whole first line. The part that's translated, which art in heaven, is di ba shemaya. Actually, even with which art in, I won't want to go into this linguistically, but actually what the Aramaic says is this avun, this creating, fathering, mothering of the cosmos, is within Shemaya. It is within the realm of light, of sound, of vibration, which connects us with the seen and the unseen. It's the quantum field, if you want to use those terms. But it's also moving to and from. It's d and it's b. Those are two prepositions. And so that's not even translated from the Greek into the English. They just say abun de bashmaya. So whatever abun is, it's somewhere else, not here. But in the Aramaic, it's all here. And not only is it all here, but it's moving. It's moving through us. It's moving in us. It's changing. It's creating. We're in the time of Lent. And so we want to hold that hope of possibility, that if things need to be changed in our own lives or in the lives of our culture, our communities, our countries, that there is hope for that. And Abun takes us to that place where everything's possible. Okay, so di ba shemaya, di ba shemaya. So we're going to chant a little bit like this. Excuse me, I'm going to mute myself just briefly while I readjust my mic. Avun, avun, avun. Okay, I think that's a little better. We're going to chant like this. Avun deva shemaya. Avun deva shemaya. And if you see what I'm doing, I'm leaning forward and back on Avun, like rocking, leading from my heart. So my whole upper body rocking back and forth. And then on Shemaya, just circling with my upper body. Again, my heart is leading rather than my head. You can't see that here maybe, but hopefully you can feel it. Heart is leading as I circle from my left shoulder to my right on Shemaya. So feeling that circle of our connection with all of creation, with the seen, with the unseen worlds, with all of nature. And we keep dipping into the heart, feeling our own connection to Source, that creative possibility, and then that circling movement either to the right or to the left. And again, if you get mixed up, don't worry about it, because there's no wrong way. Just feel the feeling. Do the movement smaller than what I was showing if that's helpful for you. Here we go. Avun deva shemaya. 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 Now just in the silence, breathing with the words. Aru Deva Shemaya. Aru Shemaya. Aru Deva Shemaya. Intoning Aru Deva Shemaya. 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 Amen. Over to you, Joe.
Okay. Thank you, Neil, very much. Can I be heard now?
Yes.
Thank you. So it's hard to speak after something like that. I mean, it's just a matter of settling into the silence and allowing the sacred words of Yeshua, as I like to call him by his Aramaic name, Yeshua, as they echo in our own hearts. So who was this man, Yeshua, and what do we know about him? And I like to point out to people when we're doing this work that Yeshua is a man for everyone. It doesn't matter if you believe in him as a Christian, because Christians have their own particular way of associating with him, or all particular kinds of beliefs that we have about Yeshua. And but there are still people of all faith traditions and many spiritual paths and no spiritual path who recognize him as a man of goodness, a man of healing, a man of wisdom, a teacher. He has many titles, many names you can use for him. I like calling him my brother. I mean, there's many ways you can refer to him. And so I want to introduce you to a spiritual practice called the gazing with holy icons. And I hope that will become clear to you as our time together moves on this morning. The word darshan, it's an ancient Sanskrit word and it's transliterated D-A-R-S-H-A-N, darshan. And it refers to a sacred gaze that is exchanged between a spiritual teacher and a student. It is also between you and a sacred object. There are many ways to think about darshan, but it's the gaze of blessing. This is not so strange as it may seem at first, because don't we all look at those we love with eyes of love? You know, you don't have to say anything. You can look at your spouse or your partner, your children, your friends, and simply love them just by the way you are looking at them. And so this is where darshan comes from. You transmit the feeling of love that others have given you. Others have shown you how to see life. Others have given you darshan, giving you a way to look at others, a way to look at life, a way to see things. And so this gaze is natural to human beings who gaze with love at loved ones. And furthermore, there is a lineage of lovers, of loving gazes that we all inherited. One can go to one's spiritual teacher. Some of us call that a spiritual director or a guide, and exchange conversation about your spiritual journey. But in some traditions, you simply, at a particular time, you might go to your spiritual guide and you sit there and you simply get looked at with love. There's no words exchanged at all. And not only your eyes are looking, but the eyes of all of your teachers. Who has looked at you, and who has looked at those teachers and those teachers and those teachers? So think of it as a long lineage of blessings given through the eyes, generation after generation to generation. They're finally coming through your eyes. And now with this technology, I'm looking at the camera on my computer, looking at that green dot and looking at you and blessing all of you with my eyes. I invite you to do the same. So this gaze is natural to us. And we can always think about who has shown us how to see life, who has shown us how to look at others, who has shown us how to view creation. We've all had teachers. They have given us the power of darshan, the ability to look with love. Has creation ever gazed back at you? Is an interesting question. Do you have animals who live with you in your home, a dog or a cat, for example? I have a wonderful cat who gives wonderful darshan. And it isn't always about asking for a treat. It's just simply looking. And I'm wondering, what's he thinking about? And he loves people, and he would certainly be here if there were 200 of you in the house. He loves to be with people. And maybe I can interrupt his nap at some point and show you to him. He's a wonderful, wonderful being to live with. Has creation ever looked back at you? Animals with whom you share our lives, sunrises and sunsets, trees, flowers, mountains, rain, snowfall. We just had an enormous snowfall here in the Chicago area. And as difficult as it was to get around, it was just a beautiful cloaking of the earth with mounds of snow. It was so beautiful. And I had the sense the snow was looking at me and blessing me, covering over everything with this beautiful white. So creation looks back at us. In Orthodox Christianity, there's a practice of venerating icons. All of Christianity has that practice, but in particular Orthodox Christianity, I've learned something special from them. It's not meant to be a worship of an image, but a venerating of the image, a prayerful gaze at a depiction of what is sacred. If you walk into an Orthodox church, you can experience this exchange of gazes. In Chicago, there's a Holy Trinity Russian Orthodox church, a beautiful small church that was built by the Tsar of Russia, or paid for by him, for the Russian immigrants who came to Chicago before the turn of the century, and they have a place to worship. And it's a beautiful little church, and the walls are covered with icons, and you walk into there and you feel like you've walked into heaven, because all these prophets and angels and saints are all looking down at you from the walls. It's a beautiful experience. And this is not true of all Christian art. Some of it is rather trivializing of the sacred rather than respectful of it. Anyway, so the icon that you saw on your screen, and the ones that one was sent to you as a handout, those of you who were able to receive it, is an ancient icon I want to tell you something about. It has a wonderful story, and it's worth knowing about. And we're going to be using that for our prayer of gazing. You'll see behind my shoulder, I have a framed copy of that icon. This very famous icon of Christ is called Spaz, or Savior, and was painted by the most renowned iconographer of Russia, Saint Andrei Rublev, who is considered a saint in the Orthodox Church. In the year 1410, for the monastery to a monastery near Moscow. Originally from the supplicating tier of the iconostasis, or altar icon screen, a screen that covers the altar, through which we enter the royal doors. This is a very sacred place to go into, but the screen has these beautiful icons on it. This was painted for that particular screen above the royal doors of this church. And Christ here as Savior expresses great love and compassion for us sinners in a face filled with light, kindness, and gentleness. I use the word sinners. That's a touchy word for lots of us. But my friend and teacher Matthew Fox says, sin is forgetting our own goodness. That's what sin is. When we forget that we are good, that God created us good, we can allow others to abuse us, or we can be abusive of others, or be abusive of the earth, and so forth. So sin comes from forgetting goodness. So Yeshua looks upon us through this icon with love and compassion and gentleness. The story of this icon is unusual, and it shows God's great providence. In 1918, experts of Russian iconography, knowing that this celebrated icon painter of the 14th and 15th centuries had lived in this ancient town, went to look if somehow one of his icons had lain there unknown over the centuries. As we know from art history and so forth, things tend to disappear sometimes. After a careful search in the Cathedral of the Annunciation, where nothing was found, the search widened to the surrounding annexes around the church. There, in a timber store under a firewood pile, they found 3 blackened icon boards with paint peeling. When they were cleaned, this icon appeared together with icons of Archangel Michael and St. Paul. Later, a document was found to confirm the truth of this wonderful find. So what you see in this reproduction is the face of Yeshua. The paint has been peeled off, it's been damaged, it laid under a wood pile for a number of years and so forth. So it's not in perfect condition, but the gaze and the look and the blessing that is in the original still comes through, and it can come through a computer screen as well too, I'm finding. So I'd like to just take a moment. Laura, if you could put that icon up on the screen for us to look at. I'm going to invite you to just simply look into the eyes of Yeshua. And allow him to look back at you. And if you can let go of anything you may have heard the church say about this man, or any pain that may be associated with the word Jesus, that's why I like calling him Yeshua. He walked among us. He was here on this earth once. And we have wonderful stories about who he was and what he did. And he left us a prayer that we're studying today and learning how to pronounce in his own language. So typically this kind of prayer is done without words. I'm kind of guiding a meditation along with looking at the image just to kind of guide you into it. But the prayer of gazing doesn't need words. It only needs looking and allow yourself to be looked at. It's a wonderful practice to have at the end of the day. Light a candle in front of it in the darkening room. And just bring who you are. No need to say anything. Like two lovers coming together. You simply look, appreciate, understand, and love each other. And so now simply breathe in the image of Yeshua, our brother, who looks at us through this ancient image, comes to us from Holy Russia from so many centuries ago. Breathe it in and breathe it out. And just take a moment now to close your eyes. And Laura, you can take the icon off if you wish now. Amen. Thank you. And
Neil, we go back to you.
Thanks, Joe. Let's stay with that feeling of more contemplative, feeling our way, you could say, beyond what appears to us, feeling inside, feeling outside with the eyes of the heart. Lent is, of course, traditionally a time of letting go. Even though I was raised Lutheran, we still commemorated Lent in those days as a time to give up something. And although I don't know how popular that is, many traditions also have this time of the year of letting go, of making space. And this is what really the next line of the prayer is about. This is not obvious from the English version, which is hallowed be thy name, or holy be your name. The Aramaic has nitkadish shemoch, nitkadish shemoch. Let your shem, your name or your sound, or your vibration, your atmosphere, let your resonance. And we're speaking here to Allah, or to Abun, the source itself. Jesus calls God Allah, which, yes, is quite similar to Allah. And it's midway from Elohim, which is one of the ancient Hebrew sacred names, to the Arabic Allah. Allah, really just the unity, the one being, as most of for thousands of years, the sacred names in the Middle East were pointing to a both and, a interpenetration of yes and no, of something and nothing, if you will. Hence a unity. So no, you could say not separated. We may be able to distinguish our life here from the source, and it's imperative, you could say, that we do not bury our talents in the earth, as Yeshua talks about, but at the same time, we're always aware that our soul, you could say what Jesus calls our rucha, is always connected to source. So we have an individual self, which Jesus calls nephesh. Well, that's Hebrew, nafsha. So this is not necessarily the subconscious self as modern psychology looks at it, but it's our feeling perception of ourselves as separate beings. It's not to say this is not real. This is a relative reality, if you excuse me getting too far out on that. So we're one of our job descriptions here as human beings, according to the Hebrew prophets, according to Yeshua, is to uncover the treasures within us and get rid of the veils that prevent us from touching what he could call our real nature, our healthy nature in connection with all beings and connection with each other, as Joe mentioned. So it's only when we forget that tends to happen. So Nitkadish Shemoch, help us let your Shem, your vibration, become Kaddish in us, which really means to be focused. Let there be space within me in order for this remembrance of what's important, of reality itself, of something bigger than just the me. Something bigger than me has to be some space for that. Otherwise, our whole heart is filled with a sort of a selfiness, if you excuse the modern expression. So Nitkada Shemok, help us let go, breathing one holy breath. That's where this line is really about. I'm not going to parse the roots individually, but there's a lot there. And so we do this with a body prayer where we're, again, starting from a feeling with the heart and moving from sort of right to left. But if you can imagine that my heart is making like a figure 8, like that, or just sort of gently sort of moving back and forth in any particular way that feels flowing to you, feels like letting go, like the drop, sort of realizing that it's really part of the ocean. It's only my shall I say my drippiness? No, my droppiness that allows me to think that I'm separate from everyone and everything else. Of course, there's a lot of that going around, as they say. So we go like this, nitkad shemoch, nitkad shemoch, nitkad. And then there's another melody. You'll hear me change and just change with me or sing something else. And then there's a slower melody where we're just going to lean with our hearts to the right and lean with our heart to the left. Feel as though our hearts are like a cup to be filled. And what are they being filled with? Well, they're being filled with the Shem of God, the Shem of Allah itself, of reality itself. You could say the one beingness, as Jesus might feel it. So help us let go, so that the name comes to live. Focus your light within us. That's what happens when we allow the letting go to happen, the veils to fall, the real light can shine through. Nitkad shemoch, nitkad shemoch, nitkad shemoch, nitkad shemoch, kad shemoch, nitkad shemoch, kad shemoch, nitkad shemoch, nitkad shemoch, nitkad shemoch, nitkad shemoch. Nitkad shemoch, 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 second. Nemo it Kadesh Shemo 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 it Kadesh Shemo. Allowing our eyes to close for just a moment, feeling our breath in or near our hearts. Again, placing one hand perhaps over the heart very lightly, very gently, so that we can feel a heart that is our own heart's pulsation underneath our hand, mingling with what Yeshua calls rucha, the breath that is always connecting us to Source, our breath connecting us to holy breath, rucha dukudsha, making space there for the remembrance of what's important in our lives. Where do we spend most of our time? That's what's holy for us. Breathing the words, sort of the inner breath of the words, Nit Kadesh Shemoch. I'm feeling those words resonating in my heart with the feeling of my breathing, with the sensation of my heartbeat. The heart like a mirror or like a clear pool of water, each breath becoming more and more clear, more able to see clearly, feel clearly, hear clearly, all the senses refreshed. Just breathing, heartbeat, and the word, the feeling of the word. Kaddish, Kaddish. Let it be Kaddish. Focused, illuminating, empty, spacious. Amen, amen. Now, if you go back and listen to some of the recording of this, there will be, I think, an audio and a video. I think that's going to be available for you. You can pause the recording. Isn't that lovely? At any particular line where you want to spend a little bit more time or just go into the silence. But as Hildegard said, I think it's Hildegard, oh no, it's Meister Eckhart. He says there's also letting go of letting go. And Tete Malkutach enters, you could say, the field now clearly, having made space for the holy name. You could say the not only a name, but any, you could say, vibration of reality that reminds us of holiness, of more than just me. That's what a holy name is. Then the Malkuta of Allah can come through us, the Malkuta, God's Malkuta, as Yeshua would call it. And that's in fact what the prayer asks for next. We ask for something further, which is Tete, let your Malkuta come through us. And I know this was translated as kingdom, let your kingdom come, thy kingdom come. Well, really, I have bad news for that translation. The Pope hasn't gotten around to correcting this one yet, but even the Greek version of the word that is translated as kingdom is feminine. It's a feminine gendered word. So if you want to get really strict about it, should be let your queendom come. We won't talk about why that didn't happen over the centuries, but absolutely the Aramaic here is a feminine gendered word. And I don't want to get into gendering in Aramaic and Hebrew and all of that, because that's another whole thing, which is, again, much more holistic than you might think from reading your translations. We say, let your Malkuta, let your I can, let your vision come through us. Okay, our heart is clear, the space is more clear now to see clearly. Okay, let your vision of what's mine to do in unison with the source, let that come through me now. And give me not only a vision of what's mine to do, give me the energy, give me the empowerment to do that vision. So Malkuta is vision and energy together. It can happen on the individual level. That's where we ask it, let your Malkuta come through. But it can also happen on the cultural, on the community level, where a community, a group, a nation stands up and says, okay, this is the vision. You know, we're going to get rid of the veils. And, you know, this is the original vision. This is the vision coming through now. We get rid of that stuff that we thought was right before. And we follow that vision in tune with, you could say, in tune with the source, in tune with the original human nature, which is what Genesis 1:26 asks us to do, really. Rather than dominate and subdue the earth. But I won't go into that either. It says really, attune, feel yourself as part of all of nature is what the Hebrew actually says, not dominate and subdue it. And so this is what we're called to here. Te te malkuta, let your I can come through us. And we're going to chant that a little bit. Let your te te, let it come, let it really come. It's an intensive form of the verb. Malkutah, your Malkuta, let your I can come through us. Here we go. Just follow me. We start with the same sort of movements. The melodies are similar, except that here we're going to do, at some point we're going to do right shoulder, left shoulder, up and to the heart. So we have an equal balance cross, the center in the heart, connecting this reality. You can see it as a circle if you want. And also this reality, our communal reality and our individual reality. And that prepares for the next line of the prayer. So, you know, it's like a Celtic cross. It's not a cross of crucifixion, although, okay, you know, we're being crucified with in many aspects of our culture today, things that are painful, things we need to let go of, things we need to declare as unripe. Well, the prayer gets to that later. But for now, we have to ask it for ourselves. Let the vision of what's really mine to do come through with the energy to accomplish that. Te te malkuta, te te malkuta, te te malkuta, te te malkuta, te malkuta, te te malkuta, te te malkuta, te te malkuta, te malkuta, te te malkuta, te te malkuta, te te malkuta. Te te malkuta, 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 te te malkuta. Feel it in your heart. Te te malkuta, 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 slower melody and movement. Te, te, te. He malkuta. Te, te. He malkuta. Bowing. Te, te. And turning to the right. He malkuta. Bowing again. Te, te. And to the left. He malkuta. Te, te. 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 He malkuta. And breathing the words, feeling them in the heart. Te, te, malkuta. Those open sounds. Uniting head and heart, we could say. Our individuality, our individual self is here for a reason, and that's to fulfill the unique purpose in life for which we came, the Malkuta of the One coming through us. As Jesus says, the kingdom is within you, the Malkuta, the queendom, the kingdom, the reigning vision of the cosmos is within you. It's all around you, as he says in Thomas. It's spread out around you, but you simply don't see it. Amen. And we're going to go right into the long line, ending the fourth line, so we stay on schedule here. What does the KJV say, the King James, excuse me for using the, let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, that's fine, except for the will of the earth and the heaven. No, those are fine too. The will causes people problems, I understand. In Aramaic, we have sibayanach, which is really a willingness, a heart willingness, if you will. There is no willingness. If I say, I'm willing to do that, I can hear in my heart, in my voice, whether my voice is in my heart, whether I'm really willing to do that or not, or whether I'm just saying, oh, well, yeah, I'll do that. Well, in order to have willingness, you have to have a will. The Malkuta is the empowerment, you could say, of our individual heart will, as Allah expresses it through each of us uniquely. The Sibiyanach. So the Aramaic says, let your Sibiyanach, Allah Abun, let your Sibiyanach come through us. And what is it going to do? It's going to unite Shemaya, the connected world. Everything's connected. And it's going to unite the individual world. That's Ara. It's going to unite, as I wrote somewhere, wave and particle together. But that doesn't have to get so highfalutin. It just means it unites my individual purpose in life, my feeling for what's mine to do, with what's also good for the community. Really, you can find, as our friend Matt Fox says, you can find the whole 4 paths of creation spirituality in the first 4 lines of the prayer exactly. So we're going to chant a little bit. The words go like this. I'll chant them first, and then we'll add the melody. And we're just going to do one of the simple movements, which is leaning from the heart to the right, leaning from the heart to the left, like this. And it goes Nechwe, Sibiyanach, Aikana, Deba Shemaya, Of Ba'ar Ah. Nechwe, Sibiyanach, Aikana, Deba Shemaya, Of Ba'ar Ah. Nechwe, Sibiyanach, Aikana, Devash Maya, Of Ba'ar Ah. Nekwe Suvyana Aikana Devashmaya Af Ba'a Nekwe Suvyana Aikana Devashmaya Af Ba'a Nekwe Suvyana Aikana Devashmaya Af Ba'a Nekwe Siviana Aikana Devashmaya Af Ba'a Nekwe Siviana Aikana Devashmaya Af Ba'a Nekwe Siviana Aikana Devashmaya Af Ba'a. Breathing the words again. Nekwe Sivyana Aikana Devashmaya Af Ba'a. 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 Breathing with the words of Yeshua Sabah, Nekwe Sivyanach. That Sabah, that willingness, heart willingness is there, saying yes to life, yes to what's mine to do. Amen, amen.
Thank you, Sadi. Thank you, Neil. It was wonderful. A very rich collection of sacred phrases. Ordinarily, we would linger on these for a much longer period of time, but at least
For a day, Joe, we used to.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. For a long time. Yeah, for a whole day with one phrase, one sacred phrase was wonderful. So, Laura, in just a moment, after I introduce what we're going to be doing next, we'll be dividing into groups of 5. And I'll just say something about some discussion groups, which is possible with Zoom. Make sure that everyone in your group of 5 has a chance to speak. We'll have until 15 minutes for this, so make sure everyone in the group has a chance to speak on this. So what to talk about? Begin, first of all, with some silence before you begin speaking. And I'd like to just call upon some of the things that Neil has said earlier about Malkuta. Any of you who have children perhaps will remember a time when they were growing up and ready to go to school, and they've learned how to tie their shoes. I like using this as an example. They're learning how to tie their shoes, and they feel so grown up and big to be able to do that. And the school bus is waiting outside to pick them up for school, and you say, "Come on, let me do that for you because you're going to be late." And what do they say? "I can do it. I can do it." There's that sense that when you know how to do something, you feel empowered to do it. So that's kind of innate in us. I just like to point that out. That's kind of who we are. You have the sense of my own Malkuta. What is my vision to do? What is my I can do it? And how does that connect with God's Malkuta? God's I can do it. And ours, all Malkuta together, joined together. This is the purpose of having a church. If we're not doing it together, we bring our individual empowerment, Malkuta, with God's Malkuta, in our collective Malkuta. This is how the world can become better. So Malkuta has a sense of purpose in it. What is the purpose that I feel deep within me that I can bring to your purpose? So these are just some thoughts that I'd like to ask you to just let them sit for a minute or so before you begin to speak. But the idea is, what is your Malkuta? How does that connect with God's Malkuta and the world's need for your Malkuta coming together to help serve the world? So that's the question I invite you to discuss. Make sure everyone has a chance to speak. And Laura, you can divide those groups up now if you wish. Thank you. So Laura, perhaps you can start to bring us back together.
Lost my track of the time in 21 seconds.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, you can hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. All right, great, thanks. Thanks, Laura. Appreciate your help today. This is wonderful.
Oh, I appreciate you letting me be a part of this. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
Brother Joe. Oh, Brother Joe, good to see you.
Yeah, who's that? Who is this?
Joe.
Joe, we're all coming back now from our breakout rooms, and we do have a 15-minute break
Yes.
here, and we've done a couple things. We disabled the chat, which I know that some people find annoying, but we can maybe enable that during the break if you want to chat. And Laura Waterman, who I want to introduce. Hi, Laura. Laura's waving. She's our Zoom host today. So thank you. A big shout out to Laura. We thought that a 15-minute break would be nice so people could stretch or get a little something to eat. And again, my name is George Smith, and I'm here in Glen Ellen, Illinois, where it is a beautiful day. The sun is shining. It is 10 degrees warmer than it should be normally. That's beautiful, but it's okay to be inside as long as we're doing this. This is worth it. So anyway, Joe, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, George, I want to ask people when you come back after the 15-minute break, come back with pen and paper, notebook, clipboard, whatever it is. You need one sheet of paper and a pen. We're going to be doing just a little bit of writing. And so just bring that with you when you come back. And we'll be back in 15 minutes, okay?
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
When Neil is talking and using these words, if they could scroll across the screen, that we could see the words that he's using, not the English, but the Aramaic.
I cannot scroll them across the screen. I can display them though.
Well, there's a little bit of an issue because we want to see Neil. So
That's true.
And everybody should have received the document that shows the words. So you should
Okay.
have that in your email. If you don't have that, look for it. But we'll see what we can do.
Do you
They
have
can also
that?
be put on chat. Just the one.
Excellent point, Flavia.
Possible.
Excellent point. Do you have the handout, Gretchen?
I do, but it's on the computer downstairs and I couldn't
know
get
that
it to
feeling.
print it off.
I know that.
I don't know what's going on with
I'll
that
put
one.
it in chat and, oh, this will be good. I'll figure out something cool. Okay, I'll
that
put
would
it
be-
in chat at least, but and I will get it to you.
That would be cool.
If I could say something, this
Absolutely.
is Sue Brinkman. I'd like to show Joe in particular, but everybody, this image of the Holy Face. It is, it's a painting. It's a reproduction of a painting by Georges Rouault, a French painter.
Yes.
And I find that gazing with this image is just amazing because the eyes are so beautiful, for one thing.
Mhm.
And is that image something that people could find on the internet? It's George Rouault.
It's, yeah, it's
How do you spell his last name?
Rouault,
Right.
Georges Rouault.
Okay.
And it's George with an S on
And
the
it's,
end. It's French.
Gorgeous.
Okay, and do you know the name of the piece?
Well, it's called the Holy Face in English. The French
Holy
is
Face.
La Face. I don't, sacred. It's probably the
That's good
French for
enough. I'm
sacred.
sure they can find it. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
okay.
great.
That's beautiful.
It's in the Vatican collection. Is where the original is.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll see you in a little bit.
Lunch.
Can I ask an academic question to anybody that might know? I've heard that the Gospels were first written in Greek, And if that's true, how do we know what the prayer sounded like in Aramaic? Is it working backwards or from an oral tradition or some other document or something else?
I think Neil would be best. He's the scholar in this area, but he'll be best to answer that question more accurately than you could. But he's not on the screen right now. He may have just he's taking a break right now, so we'll try to get that answered for you. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can. Oh, go ahead.
No, Aramaic's a living language, and the tradition of the spoken language wasn't lost in the same way as Hebrew, for example.
Also, hi, my name is Mara, and I've studied with Sadi for such a long time and taught some of this. And so my answer won't be complete, but I've been fascinated with the language aspects of it as well. What we know is that the Paschita version of the Bible that Neil is teaching from, the Aramaic language version, was written very, very close to the same time that the Greek version was printed. So it's not contemporaneous by any means, but what Neil has taught is that it's very clear when you look at Greek what the Aramaic would have needed to have been to have resulted in that particular Greek phrasing or Greek vocabulary, and then to translate back. And it's not entirely clear how the Aramaic Bible came about, whether it was the source, which the Aramaic speaking Christians believe it was the source, or whether it was a back translation from the Greek. It isn't clear. But the two languages are so different that there is, a Greek word, there is only one Aramaic word that would really produce that Greek translation, which is an interesting backwards way of thinking about it. So that's a small little answer from a linguistic.
That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
I think
you.
it's also good to keep in mind that originally this was we're talking about an oral tradition. So things were passed on orally before they were written down too, so there's an even older tradition before anything was written. They remembered him saying this, and they gathered that together and so forth. Oh, what a beautiful dog you have there. It's great.
Yeah, if you go to aboon.com, he's got whole books on this subject. Neil Douglas Klotz. So it takes you down a rabbit hole for sure, but it's really interesting. So
this is Camille from Chicago. We will try to confirm that when Neil comes back. I listened to a Zoom about the Paschita Bible about 6 months ago. But if I remember well, it was written about after the four Gospels. If we talk about the four Gospels, which were written between 65 AD to 95 AD, the Paschita, to my understanding, was almost in the 2nd century. It was written there to combine the four together. Now, the language of Jesus Christ is the Aramaic language. But the translations, to my understanding, as you said, Benjamin, right, Ben? It was all Greek, right? This is what my understanding from studying the scriptures, that the Gospels were in Greek. This is how they were written. Although, they were attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, but no one have signed his book at the end. There is no book whether in the Old Testament or the New Testament where we see someone who signs his name, except maybe we know the letters of Paul, some of them because he mentions his name, and maybe a Revelation where John says that I am John. And so I think this is what I remember. It was written after all these Gospels, the Paschita, and they tried to bring everything in it together, and they brought it back to the Syriac or Aramaic language. I don't know much, but we will hear maybe. We'll ask the expert later.
It is the same Bible. It does contain the same books. It's the same stories. They are a mirror reflection of each other. It's just a matter of how they got to be, what the relationship was between them. The Paschita Bible is not different from, the Bible structurally or all of that. But the language and translation are still of some there's still some scholarly question about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You see, when you study scripture, they tell you to respect each Bible as is. Do not mingle things, just mix things, because every writer was writing to a special community and has a message to that community, not to mix them all together. That was, if I remember, this is how studying the scriptures. But here the Paschita is combining all of them, the four together. Although you know how they are divided, the Synoptic Gospel and the Malveric Gospel, and one is a Christology, John's Gospel, and the other three are more about the human Jesus. So there is such difference. But I don't want to get into these details. Maybe we'll learn these questions from Neil, if he is the expert to explain that. Sorry, we are just sharing.
Sure.
I have a question. Which is there a recommended translation of the Paschita Bible? I was looking on Amazon last night, and there's at least a dozen different translations. Is there any one that, I don't know, is more, that you would feel would be more true to what Jesus actually was trying to get across?
I'll be honest with you about one thing. Although Neil mentioned that the Syriac or Aramaic churches are using it, but I tell you one thing. I am a parishioner of St. John the Baptist Syriac Orthodox Church in Chicago. Okay, we don't use the Paschita till today in our Mass, neither our Archdiocese in New Jersey, neither our Archdiocese in California, neither our Archdiocese in Canada, and I don't think even, I don't know, but neither in Syria or Iraq. I come from Iraq. When I left Iraq in 95, we didn't use it because I don't know when it was written really, or when it was. So far, we are not using it. We use the King James new edition, revised. And for the Arab, this is the English. And for the Arabic, we use something Van Dyke or the Coptic version. We haven't used, but I have been hearing about it, but we haven't used it yet. So I don't know. Where is it used so far? Really?
The Paschita, again, is not a different Bible from all of the translations that we've worked with. It's the same Bible written in the Aramaic language. So any variations and translations that we see that have come forward over the last 2,000 years, there is no such thing as a definitive translation, because translation is translation, right? There are many different directions that you can take when you're translating Aramaic, and some languages force you to choose. You can't use the word Shem to mean light and name and vibration and energy. So the Greek chooses one of those, and that's what shows up in the Greek translation. If you're looking at it in Aramaic and you know Aramaic, you're going to get all of those meanings wrapped up in that one word. The word Shem is going to have all of those meanings all at once. In Greek, they had to just pick one and go with that. Right. In English, you had to pick one and go with that. So what Neil is able to do is take us back to the sense that people who listened to Yeshua's words would have carried forward, that is much more complete in that way than the sort of the limited needing to make specific translational choices as his words would have been carried through over the centuries. So it's not an inaccurate or incomplete translation. It's just what happens when you're trying to move meaning from one language, which is very closely related to the culture, and then try to translate that into a different time, a different culture, a different language, and a different worldview. So it's a great question.
Thank you for explaining that. No, this is wonderful.
It's why Neil's teachings are so profound.
Yes.
And why I went right down that Aramaic language rabbit hole myself. I became completely fascinated with the teachings and also with the Aramaic language issues. So Camille, I really appreciate your coming on and talking. I learned Syriac and studied some of the modern version of modern Syriac as well as ancient Aramaic. And it's just, you know, that's my rabbit hole.
Thank you.
Now
Now,
that you learn it, is there an online resource you could recommend where I could start looking up some of these words?
I learned it because I went to a modern Syriac church and I got a hold of, I've got some wonderful, I have the interlinear Paschita Bible, which gives you the Aramaic, and then it gives you how you would pronounce that, and then it tells you the specific translation of each word going from right to left. And I just kind of started piecing language and vocabulary together using that. And then I happened to run across a course that was being taught by University of Chicago, I think years ago, and I don't think that's even going anymore. I went right down the rabbit hole, so.
Well, Neil's first book, you know, Prayers of the Cosmos, has each of those phrases with about 6 translations for each of the phrases, you know, so that would be a very good resource.
Here's what it looks like. Prayers of the Cosmos. It's available on Amazon.
Yeah.
And we can put a link to that in an email after the retreat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could somebody spell for me the name of the Bible? Does it begin with P? Paschita? What is the word?
It's Peshitta. This is my interlinear Paschita Bible. You can see the Aramaic language from right to left, and then the pronunciation, and then in between the specific translation of each word. It's fascinating.
And is that the one that Lamsa translated? Is that the same manuscript?
Yes, it's there's only one Paschita, and his translation is one translation of that. Lamsa's, yes, exactly.
Is that interlinear available anywhere else?
Yeah, you can Google it. Interlinear Paschita, Peshitta Bible.
I have the Paschita, but I don't have the interlinear.
And the spelling is in the handout up on top.
Yeah.
All right.
That wasn't where I started. When I went to the Holy Apostolic Catholic Assyrian Church of the East in Phoenix, Arizona, I was gifted with this wonderful, which is the liturgy. And it's the same kind of thing with the Aramaic, the pronunciation and the translation in 3 different columns. So it was a wonderful cryptography for me to begin to learn. You know, I couldn't go to a marketplace and ask for a chicken, but I can repeat the Gospels. It's not very practical.
Well, we are going to regather ourselves after this great break. And it's wonderful to have everybody. So as you know, what works best is for everybody to be muted. So Laura will mute everybody. And then Neil, I know you're going to continue to work through the prayer with us. So Neil, are you there?
I am here. I came in just as someone was buying a chicken in Aramaic.
And so make sure your microphone, I think some people have experienced some, the sound getting a little bit dimmer.
Dimmer. Okay, I'm watching my level.
Farther away. So just make sure your microphone is in the right position. Thank you.
Okay, I will do that. Okay, welcome back, everybody. People are still coming in here. Oh, people are doing all right. And yes, well, I'm glad you answered all your questions while I was offline. So you'll find there's a lot on my website, and as I said at the top, I'm not really getting into these the academic questions here. It's really about a contemplative journey today. I am starting in April, the Sunday after Easter Sunday. I'm starting an 8-week series on the Gospel of John in Aramaic, and at least part 1 of that. So if you want to find out about that, go to aboon.org, abwoon.org. We're going to, as we're gathering here, feel the first half of the prayer that we've been through, the blessing beginning in the source, beginning in, you could say, the finger pointing towards the moon, towards the source of all, which is what prayer does. Then the letting go, then the breakthrough of the Malkuta, and then the bringing together in our consciousness, or you could say re-bringing together heaven and earth with our Sibyanach. Really, it's about a journey of the individual self from a, you could say, a connected place, which is where we began 10 or 20 or 100,000 years ago. We were connected with nature, very little sense of an individual self. Then gradually, our individual self becomes more and more individual, more selfness. And that's not just about a difference in words, that's about a difference in the change in human consciousness over hundreds of thousands of years. So Jesus is right in the middle of that, and he shows us with his prayer a way to go. So we're going to tone a little bit to recall our first part of our journey. Avun, 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 chay. So chay is another of these old words that are used in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic, meaning life energy. Chay is a little bit more ay at the end, or ay, chay in the Aramaic than in the Arabic or in the Hebrew, or Hebrew has chayim, lachayim. So life energy. For Jesus, this life energy is also all around us and within us. Whenever he speaks of eternal life, as it's translated, he uses the words chay de alma, life that renews itself from level to level, from age to age, from worlds to worlds. There is no real separation between life here, as we experience it, my own life, so to speak, and that life, all of life. The separation of these things happened later through language, philosophy, and theology, I would say. I'm not sure which one leads the pack there, but we're going to intone like this to start. Avun, 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 chay, avun. So right shoulder and left and up and to the heart. Avun, 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 chay, avun, 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 chay, avun, 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 chay, avun, 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 chay, avun, avun, chay, avun, 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 chay, avun, 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 chay, avun, 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 chay. On the breath, just in the silence, feeling the words. Avun, 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 chay, avun, avun, avun. We feel them in the heart. Avun, 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 chay, 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 avun, 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 hum, avun, 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 chay, avun, 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 chay. And just for a moment, breathing, feeling, connecting to source, whatever we call that. Jesus calls it Avun. Feeling spaciousness in the heart as we breathe, as we settle within. As we call it today, going inside a bit. The word for prayer meaning create this space. So nitkad shemoch. And if we spend enough time with that, there will be this breakthrough of the Malkuta, of the individual I can, in a healthy way within us. We first discover it as children, as Joe mentioned, and then gradually we discover more and more, hopefully, what it means to be human, really human. Heaven and earth uniting together, you could say our heart's desire and that of Allah merging, mingling together. Amen, amen. We come now to the second half of the prayer, and if the first half recapitulates or reminds us of the, you could say, the journey of creation that Genesis 1 describes, and I would say it does, breath coming into the darkness, the unknowing, the breakthrough of light, like the breakthrough of Malkuta, and then all of creation being spread out around, being made from these separation into opposites. And so we find ourselves in a time and space reality where everything is, so to speak, known by its opposites, but we fail to notice that these opposites are often or almost always connected. So in the second half of the prayer, we're invited to a different creation story, that which is told in Proverbs 8 and 9. Holy wisdom, Chokhmah, her Hebrew name, gathering different beings, sort of pre-beings together. And so creation becomes like the gathering of a dinner party. And then creation is, you could say, not only eating and drinking together, but also letting go, finding out how we live in community. So the second half of the prayer takes place in this more circular communal reality that we found in the first line. So Avun Diba Shemaya, you could say in some ways the second half is about how we are, how we live with each other. And that those questions never cease to go away. The first one is, of course, about bread. The prayer says, Havlan Lachma Desun Kanan Yamana. Havlan Lachma Desun Kanan Yaumana. Give us the bread, not only bread, not only wheat bread or non-wheat bread or gluten-free bread, but all food which can be food for what we now call our mind, our bodies, our emotions. Again, in Aramaic, they wouldn't put it that way, but food for all aspects of our lives. Lachma, Havlan Lachma. How much lachma do we need? Well, that's still a good question. How much food? So the prayer says, Desun Kanan Yaumana, for this, you could say this kanan, which is a word about containment, for this contained circle of yaum, of embodied light. That gets maybe too far out there, but you could say enough, it's about enoughness, which is an endangered species today. It's about enoughness for this illuminated moment, which is what a yaum is in Hebrew or in Aramaic. And also in Arabic, it's really the same. Yom. Yom in Hebrew, yaum in yaumana is what we have here in Aramaic, and yaum in the classical Arabic. So many of these sacred words extend over thousands of years and don't really change at all. So we're going to sing Havlan Lachma Desun Kanan Yaumana. Havlan Lachma Desun Kanan Yaumana. These are long lines of the prayer. They will take longer to learn. So just hum along with it, or sing ah or ooh, or just breathe and listen to me or whatever. You get what we're asking for. We're asking for enough nurturance. Give us what we need each day in bread, in insight, in emotional food, mental food. Give us what we need for this moment. Give us the enoughness for ourselves, for our communities. So again, it's all about communities here in the second half of the prayer. Havlan lachma desunkanan yaumana. Havlan lachma desunkanan yaumana. Just singing, feeling the heart. Havlan lachma desun kanan yaumana. 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 Just breathe for a moment. Havlan lachma. Give us the bread, the insight, that food that we need for this moment, for our communities, for ourselves. Give us the new insights that will feed us. Amen. And then we have the longest line of the prayer, which you certainly are not going to learn in 5 minutes. And we take our whole lives learning this one, actually, not the words, but how to do it. Oh, look, they're putting it in the chat. Nice. Well, here we go. Washbuklan. Washbuklan. That's what Matthew uses. Matthew's version says, Washbuklan chalbein. Release us from the stepping over the boundaries. You could say not only stealing from another person, but stealing the emotional food from another, stealing what they'd rather not have known about them, revealing what they'd rather not have known, holding on to something about someone. Washbuklan chalbein. And then Luke uses the version chatahen, which is really about an image from sewing, if you look at the root. Sewing, mending, all of this. Chatahen is a sense of a tangled thread. And so release also those tangled threads of our relationships. And then both Matthew and Luke end together, really, if you look at the Aramaic. Similarly, Aikana dafhanan shwachan al hayyabain. Yeah, that's going to cause your eyes to glaze over for sure. But listen to the sounds. It's all of these washbuklan, chobain, wachtahain, Aikana dafhanan shwachan al hayyabain, shwachan al hayyabain. Loose the cords of mistakes binding us. That would be a version from Luke. As we release the strands we hold of others' faults, that's all happening simultaneously. Release us, free us. You could say free us from our past so that we can live in the future, at least in time and space. And again, it's not an if-then. I think that's the other one important thing to say. As we release, we are released. As we are released, we release. So part of it's due to grace. Part of it's due to effort. Same old story. Let's sing a little bit, and then I'll turn it back over to Joe. Washbuklan haven wachtahen I cannot openan schwochen layaven Washbuklan haven wachtahen I cannot openan schwochen layaven Washbuklan haven wachtahen I cannot openan schwochen layaven Releasing from the heart. Deeper letting go. Washbuklan haven wachtahen I cannot openan schwohen layaven Washbuklan haven wachtahen I cannot openan schwochen hayaven Washbuklan haven wachtahen I cannot openan schwochen hayaven We're again back to the heart. Releasing, letting go, clearing the heart space of all those tangles, those complications, or beginning to do so, starting the process now within, and perhaps making some action toward it on the outside. Amen, amen.
Thank you, Neil, very much. I'm going to ask Laura if you would kindly put the icon on the screen again. And everyone, we're just going to take a minute to just briefly renew that prayer of gazing with holy icons. We've heard Yeshua's words, we've chanted them, we've learned how to pronounce a few of them. Remember them, we've heard them translated. Just look into his eyes and feel what you're feeling. Allow him to look back through this image. Thank you, Laura. So we're going to stay in one large group, but be doing some things together anyway. I just want to point out a couple of things that might be worth noticing. The value of repetition in this prayer, I think is very important. It's not like you say it once and it's over with, but as you can tell, saying it over and over again offers the opportunity to get lost in the sacred phrase. And it also taps into our the human way of learning. We learn through repetition, don't we? And in this work, what Neil has done, and what we've been doing for years now, with this Aramaic work of Yeshua, Aramaic words of Yeshua, is a tap into the human way of learning. If you're teaching your child the ABCs, repetition will help that child to learn them. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You keep on going back again and again and again. But then we found out that if you put a song to it, they learn it even faster. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those of you who have children. All right. And then if you put a little dance to it as well, they know it even more so. So our whole body begins to learn. And so this way of learning we have incorporated into this sacred work that we've been doing all this time. And I think it's masterful, just how quickly we can learn. If we were able to safely gather together, we would be dancing these words together in a sacred dance in a circle. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, this is what we do. I want to point out also the word contemplation that Neil has been using. I love the word because the motto of the Dominican order to which I belong is to contemplate and give to others the fruits of your contemplation. To contemplate, it's a wonderful word. And a good definition for that, a wonderful definition of it, is one that comes from Richard Rohr, who is a good friend and author and a Franciscan friar. And he says this: contemplation is a long, loving look at what really is. Contemplation is a long, loving look at what really is. And then he asks the question, have you ever met who you really are? Have you ever met yourself? And he has some wonderful words. He says, we have to find a place where we can receive all of our experiences without representing anything, without repressing anything. I'm sorry. We need a place where we can consider all that we've done and not done in our life, a place that's bigger than yes and no, a place bigger than the judgments we pass. At this all-embracing place, God becomes quite clear. Here there is room for every part of you and for God's presence, every part of you. And he goes on to say, I'm sure that most people in the Western world have never really met the person they really are themselves. Because at every moment, all our life long, we identify ourselves either with our thoughts, our self-image, our feelings, what others think of us. We have to find a way to get behind our thoughts, feelings, and self-image. We have to discover the face that we already had before we were born. We have to find who we were all along in God before we did anything right or wrong. Who are we to God? This is the first goal of contemplation, he says. It's a powerful word. We can linger a long time on just that word alone. A Dominican sister, artist, friend of mine who has passed recently, her name was Mary Ellen Paulson. And she was the most joyful woman I have ever met in my life. And she was a poet. And at a workshop that she gave the assignment, write a 6-line poem using only one word for each line. 6 words, one after the other, describing who you are, describing your life. What words would you choose for that? And that's what the paper and pen is for, that I'd like us to do now, because we not only discover Yeshua in this work, but we discover ourselves as well. I'll give you an example. This is the poem, the 6-line poem that I came up with at that particular workshop. I'll just show you what I came up with after thinking a while. Loved, befriended, betrayed, summoned, ardent, durable. So just an example of what I came up with. I'm going to invite you to take a few minutes to do this for yourself. 6 words, one after the other, and we'll have a chance to share some of it afterwards for a little bit. Okay.
Can you say again 6 words describing, can you just read the whole
Yeah.
thing?
Describing you. Describe yourself, your life.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. My purpose in doing this is to see who it is that we bring to the prayer. Who are we as we encounter Yeshua and his wisdom, his teaching, his love? And this is something we can linger on for a long time as well too. But if a few of you would like to share what you've written, we have a minute or two just to see what you've come up with. Maybe if you can raise your hand. And on your screen, I don't know how it is you do that, but I've seen hands popping up now and then on the screen. So if anyone would like to share that, we'd be happy to let you in for share your poem.
Can I share?
Certainly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. These are my 6 words or my poem. Love, care, survivor, tree, woman, forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
I have one.
Thank you.
Love, seeing, moving, senses deepening, becoming.
Thank you.
Could I go?
Yes.
Go ahead and go with Rosemary.
Yes. Okay. Conscientious, sincere, superficial, caring, kind, fierce.
Thank you.
May I go?
Certainly.
Unbelievable, loved, wowing, unsure, spirit.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Can I go?
Yes.
Loving, befriended, bold, broken, reborn, love.
I'd like
Thank
to
you.
share mine.
Yes.
Bulb, shatter, glow, gather, giggle, wonder.
Thank you.
I'd like to share mine. Grateful, meticulous, joyful, conscientious, observant, friendly.
Thank you.
May I?
Yes.
Woman, daughter, grounded, rooted, freed, ready.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I?
Yes.
Spirit, love, peace, contemplation, grateful, kindness.
Thank you. Maybe one more, please.
One more. Love.
Okay,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
love, loss, giving, receiving, wanting, wondering.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had time to just, linger over this for a while? And it says so much about us, doesn't it? Just those few words. And if you came back tomorrow to do it again, you'd probably come up with other words as well, too. So thank you. So Neil, let's go back to you. Thanks everyone for participating. And lines 7 and 8.
But who's counting? Yes, we're winding towards the end of the prayer, but I think you can see this is quite a deep ocean, and it's one of the reasons why people dive in and swim around for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
Like I did when I started in whenever it was, 40 years ago. So, well, we come to the end of the prayer, or towards the end of the prayer, with the two lines that have proven in some ways the most problematic in their usual translations. And these are, if you'll note on your handout, your sheet, or as you, nice, so they're appearing in the chat, I see. Wela tahalan linnisyuna, wela tahalan linnisyuna. And not, wela tahalan, let enter, linnisyuna. We'll bracket that aside. This is the one that's translated, lead us not into temptation. Pope Francis did correct this, although I don't believe he read my books, but nonetheless, he did correct this, and it's, I looked it up in the Greek too, and you can easily render the Greek in the same way that I've rendered the Aramaic. So don't ask me why it took that long to render it, don't let me enter, don't let us enter, instead of lead us not. I can tell you how long we spent in Luther's Small Catechism on this whole subject. A lot. Anyway, why God would lead anyone into temptation. Nonetheless, the Aramaic is quite clear. Do not let us enter the nisyuna is what it says. Well, nisyun or nisyuna is a very ancient Semitic word. It does mean to forget, forgetfulness, and it's a particular type of forgetfulness. Actually, the word later comes into the classical Arabic, and we find it in the Quran as well. It shows you just how many of these Semitic words really are unchanged. And I would say the largest category of loan words in the Arabic of the Quran are actually from Aramaic. So that's another whole subject. Don't let us enter forgetfulness. Well, forgetfulness of what? Well, of everything we've been praying about up till now. That is where we came from, what we're doing here, what's important, and how to treat each other rightly. All of the prophets talk about this. It's really not rocket science. And there weren't rockets anyway then. Remember your source, make space to remember. Remember that you've got an individual self and you can use it in good ways, you can use it in unripe ways. help each other get enough bread, enough food every day, get enough releasing, letting go. As I mentioned in some seminars, some of you have heard me say, the old Hebrew, if you look in the Hebrew Bible, that is in what Christians call the Old Testament, there was supposed to be a big community releasing every 7 years. All debts are forgiven. That's what still modern bankruptcy laws are based on. And every 7 times 7 years, 49 years if you're counting, there was supposed to be all land. Any land that was privately held would be thrown back into the communal pot. All private ownership of land would go back to the community. So, you know, it's an idea. Wela tachla l'nisyuna. Don't let us forget what we're on about. Don't let us forget our source. That is the ultimate temptation. Oops, sorry. I always bump here on this stage. We forget that we're not just individual selves, nafshas, if you want to use the Aramaic, but that we're also ruha, we're also breath, we're also this soul, which is always connected. And then on the other hand, the prayer says, Elah patsan min bisha, Elah patsan min bisha. At the same time, you could say, on the contrary, or you could say in addition, Elah patsan, free us from bisha, from unripeness. And this line was translated in the King James Version, deliver us from evil. Now, there is an Aramaic word for evil, and it's bisha. Bisha, bisha, bisha. Unripeness. Something is too early, something is too late. Something that's too early, maybe it's not in the right place, it's the right time. The time is out of joint. I forget which Shakespeare play that's from. But, or something can be a behavior that has gone on much too long, in which case it becomes way past its sell-by date, as we say here in the UK. It's gone off, it's gone rotten. It's a behavior, individual or communal, that it's time for it to hit the compost heap and go back to its source. So there definitely is evil in Aramaic. It doesn't mean it's all relative, but it means it's, again, part of our individual responsibility, in tune with the first half of the prayer, to decide now what is ripe in our lives. What is at the right time? What is at the right place? What is growing? What is being sustained? So maybe it's an action that's out of place or out of time, in which case, okay, reconsider. Maybe it's an action that's gone on that we've already have deeply ingrained in our neural structure, so we say, our neuroanatomy, and it's just gone on too long, and we have to work really hard, much harder than to release these impressions, release this patterning, so to speak, either individually or you could say in what I call the communal self, the communal nafsha. And there definitely was that at the time of Jesus, and there is that certainly now. We call it culture, but it has healthy and unhealthy aspects. So we need to recognize there's not only an individual self, there's a community self, and we're part of that. So it's not just what we're stuck with. So wela tachlan l'nisyuna. Say that with me. Wela tachlan l'nisyuna. We spread it out a little bit more and we chant it. So it goes wela tachlan l'nisyuna. Ela patsan, ela patsan min bisha. Ela patsan min bisha. So neither forgetful nor unripe. Of course, we could always remember. One way to do that is just remain in prayer all the time. But most of us are not called to a life of simple prayer or only prayer or being hermits. Most of us have to live in interaction with other people, other beings. And even people in religious orders recognize that they're responsible for the community. They're responsible for feeding people, healing people. It's part of what we have here in life. Ila patsan min bisha, free us from any unripe actions. Now, why does Jesus say it in the negative? Why doesn't he just say, help us always remember and help us always to be ripe? He could have. There are words for this in Aramaic, and he uses them throughout the Gospels. Well, I'm still staying with my original point of view, and this is confirmed by more and more of the Paschita of the New Testament that I translate, that this is really about being honest with oneself. There is unripeness, there is forgetfulness in us individually and in our world, and rather than just deny it and say, well, it's all one and it's all wonderful, we're called upon actually to act, to do something about it, not only to pray, but to work, as one of the old sayings goes in Latin. So we're going to chant it like this and just feel your heart becoming free. We're walking in a sort of middle path. This is what all the great traditions say. We're middle people. We're between, you could say, that life which is always living, Hayy de Alma, and that which is here now, limited in time and space. So value the opportunity that we're being given, learn, grow, love, act rightly, and be honest. Be honest with ourselves. And that's what this line is about. So listen, chant a bit, and then we'll go into a silence a bit. Weila tachlan linis yuna, Eila patsan min bisha. 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 These lines also take us to the heart and back to a deeper sense of that bringing heaven and earth together, with which the first part of the prayer ended. balancing those individual needs and those of the community, those of the good of the all. The inner and the outer, you could say, remembrance and forgetfulness. Yes, we live in a world where there is remembrance. We have permission to forget. We have permission to remember. We have permission to be ripe or to be unripe, or to change our course. Ila patsan min bisha. In between the two extremes, forgetfulness, unripeness, we have this path we can walk. Our heart illuminating that path with freedom, with joy, and with a renewed sense of creativity that comes from a deeper breath with the Source, with Allah and with Abun. Wila takhla nisuna ila patsan min bisha. Amen. We turn now to the last line of the prayer. This line is contained in Matthew's version, but not in Luke's. Yeah, that's the Ela Patsan. So actually, next after that, if you could, Laura, that would be great. So it's the long one. So it's in Matthew's version. It's not in Luke's. That shouldn't bother anyone. There was a theory for a while that it was added later. I don't find any evidence for that, and I think that theory is pretty much discarded. Western scholars in general have a very strange kink in their brain. The Western development of scholarship, they say, well, if Jesus said one thing in one place and one thing in another place, maybe he didn't say any of it. Whereas Aramaic Christians, you could say the both and mind says, well, maybe he said one and maybe he said the other. We'll just say it all. Why not? So we find the same with the Beatitudes also. So here's our last line. It's a beautiful line. Semitic prayers anyway end with some sort of something that brings everything, that circles back to the beginning. And this, in fact, is done beautifully with Jesus' prayer in Aramaic, where he says, Metul delache, because to you, delache, belongs. Malkuta returns from line 3, this vision, this icon of the cosmos. Wahaila, which we mentioned earlier, the life energy to accomplish the visions. And Wa-tesh buchta, Wa-tesh buchta. That's a long mouthful of Aramaic, but it's really beautiful. Translated as glory from the KJV, the King James Version. If you remember, this line goes, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. So it says in the in the King James Version translation. Well, kingdom we know about, power, life energy. Glory is really the song, the harmony. And this is again about when we find that ripe place to be and what is really ours to do. It is like a song, it's like a harmony, it's like a work of art. Whether our culture calls it songs or harmonies or work of art, our lives become this song and this harmony and this work of art. And we feel ourselves part of this, you could say, this cosmic universal harmony, however we depict it or imagine it to ourselves. And that's what Teshbuchtah is. It's returning. It's actually based on the word to return that we find in Hebrew and Aramaic. It's like that seventh day of creation. It's the song that's returning to its source, and we feel that return in what we do and how we act and in how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves. Wahayla wa teshbuchtah, wahayla wa teshbuchtah. And then this song, this life energy, this vision, keeps renewing itself from gathering to gathering, from ages to ages. La'alam, la'alam almin. It's like the Hebrew la'olam, if you know Hebrew. And Arabic has it too in some of the beautiful names in the Quran. For instance, Al-Alim is from the same root as this in Aramaic. So it has to do with a gathering. It has to do with we live in worlds, worlds and worlds and worlds. We came from worlds, we're in worlds. We think we're in one world, but actually we're in all sorts of different worlds. Our personal world, our family world, our community world, our state, our country, however we depict that. There are these worlds. We learn how to handle ourselves in these worlds. That's what real sort of practical knowing is about. And so, you know, it came from somewhere, it's going somewhere. We came from before, we're going to somewhere else. And in the middle, we're learning and loving and growing. So try it with me. Alam, Amin, Amen. That part is repeated several times, so you know you're going to get that for free. Or just hum along or, you know, have a cup of tea. Metul de lachemal kutach wachela wateshbuchta la'alam almin. Amen. Sealed in trust, sealed in faith. This is the earth, the living earth from which our new growth will come, which is what Amen and Amin and Amen mean. And we do the simple body prayer similar to what we started with. Metul de lache, and then circling to the right, malkutach, bowing again, wachela, wateshbuchta. We let that roll around because it's such a nice Aramaic word. La'alam, almin, amen. It's renewing from gathering to gathering. La'alam, almin, amen. La'alam, almin, amen. La'alam, almin, amen. And so it goes. Metu delah he malkuta wahayla watashbota lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Metul delah he malkuta wahayla watashbuta lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Metul delah he malkuta wahayla watashbuchta lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Metul delah he malkuta wahayla wateshbuchta lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Lolam almin amen. Once more, metul delah he malkuta wahayla watashbuchta lolam almin
almin, amen. L'olam almin, amen. L'olam almin, amen. L'olam almin, amen.
And as the sound dies away, feel our breath uniting together here. Even if you're listening on the recording, we're still there, we're still here. The sound merging with the source. Each of our songs offering praise, blessings back to the source and for all those around us. L'olam almin, amen. Amen, amen. May this be the earth from which our new growth will come. It will come. Amen.
Thank you, Neil. Wonderful. So we have a little bit of time to kind of sum up our time together. And I'd like to point out something about the context for the prayer. A good source for the historical Jesus is helpful for this. There's lots has been written about the historical Jesus and his own time and so forth, but there's one resource that I think is very reliable, and it comes from a Dominican brother of mine, Albert Nolan, and he wrote the wonderful book called titled Jesus Before Christianity. And in this book, at the very beginning, he invites us to let go of everything you've ever heard about him, everything the church ever taught you about him, and just let him speak for himself from his own time in his own space. And see what you find there. Well, there are many clues that have not been paid attention to, I find, in kind of mainland Christianity. One of them is, for example, table fellowship. Have you ever noticed how often Jesus is eating with someone? He's always having a meal someplace, with somebody. So this sense of table fellowship is very important. And we know that in his time and culture, having a meal with someone was a great act of intimacy. And you would never sit down and have a meal, even out of politeness, have a meal with someone you disapproved of. And so Yeshua was sitting down and he was not only having a meal, but he was reclining at table with sinners. He was accused of that. He reclines at table with sinners. To recline at table is a great act of intimacy. You don't do that with anybody. And to have a meal on the floor, on pillows, with people bringing food in for you and so forth is a very intimate kind of setting. And so he broke all the rules often. And he chose to become a social outcast of his own time by choice. And that was part of his message of radical inclusiveness. So this is who Yeshua was. And you can discover lots of things about him just by looking at the scriptures more closely, more carefully. And you find out all kinds of clues as to what was going on and why was he disapproved of. And why was he ultimately killed, actually? Because he just didn't go along with the with what he was supposed to. He wasn't doing and believing what he was. He was pretty radical. There's in Matthew's gospel, after he teaches the prayer, after his followers first heard Jesus speak the words that we've been singing today, in his own language, in Aramaic, Matthew describes this is what happens. And this is why I like calling Jesus my brother, or Yeshua is my brother, because he speaks like a brother to me, like an older brother to me. And he says, don't worry, your Father knows your needs before you even ask before you even ask him. So these are the words that Matthew writes in translation. I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you, not even one, Solomon in all his splendor, was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the fields, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So don't worry. Don't worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For unbelievers run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows what you need them. But seek first the kingdom and God's justice, and all these things will be given to you as well. So don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Doesn't he sound like an older brother or a wise teacher speaking to us with those wonderful words? Richard Rohr also talks about the kingdom, and Neil has been talking about that word kingdom. Reign of God is another way to say that, which I really prefer myself. He came announcing the reign of God, and Matthew Fox says, and what he got was the churches. And then he adds, what a letdown. Jesus came announcing the reign of God, but what he got was the churches. But Richard Rohr, who I quoted earlier, talks about, he says, don't confuse the reign of God with the church. They're not the same thing. The church can be a place where you learn, where you come together, where the people of followers of Yeshua can gather and do good work together. But the reign of God is a much bigger idea, much bigger concept than that. So looking back on the prayer, what can we glean from it? Yeshua says, this is how to pray. Our time is well spent when we prayed. I'm glad that this resource will be available to you, after our time together here. I'm thinking the prayer of gazing would be another resource that I invite you to take with you if you've received the handout and that you can print out for yourself. Perhaps frame that and use that in your prayer. I want to say something a little bit about Christian art. There's lots of it out there, and some of it I very much disapprove of because it trivializes the sacred. It over-sentimentalizes Yeshua, the saints, and the stories of the Gospels and so forth. It makes things a little bit too pastel and sweet looking. And Yeshua was a different kind of person, and he's not well represented by sentimental art. So as an artist myself, and as and discovering the icon of that I've been sharing with you, the Andrei Rublev icon, and there are other really fine examples, depictions of Yeshua that would be really good, that are not trivializing. I think look for them. A quote from the wonderful book Jesus Before Christianity. Albert Nolan says, "No tradition was too sacred to be questioned for Yeshua. No authority was too great to be contradicted. No assumption was too fundamental to be challenged. There are no traces of fear in Yeshua. He was not afraid of creating a scandal or losing his reputation or even losing his life. Jesus did nothing and compromised on nothing for the sake of even a modicum of prestige in the eyes of others. He did not seek anyone's approval, not even the approval of the greatest born of woman, John the Baptist. According to Mark, followed by Matthew and Luke, even Jesus' opponents admit that he is honest and fearless. We know that you are an honest man, they said. You are not afraid of anyone because a man's rank means nothing to you, and that you teach the way of God in all honesty. So, who was this man, Yeshua? I think we can discover much about him in this prayer. I invite you to make it part of your life. Even if you only used one or two phrases, or even just the first phrase, as Neil said in the beginning of our time together, Boon Devashemaya, just that first phrase, and learn that one. And that in many ways contains the whole prayer. So I can just imagine this group being someplace on a retreat center for about 5 or 6 days. Would be wonderful to be together because the few of you who I've been able to connect with briefly on screen has been wonderful. A wonderful renewal in some cases, and just some good, it's just good that you're out there. So thank you for coming. So perhaps, Laura, we can bring us all together somehow and we can say farewell to everyone. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
So Joe, on behalf of St. Mark's and Laura and me, I just want to thank everybody for being here, and Neil from Scotland and Joe from Oak Park and people from all over the world. This is amazing.
Yeah.
It's a gift, and it reflects the depth of the prayer that we've been praying and singing and just taking into our hearts. So I want to thank everybody for being part of this.
Thank you, George and Laura, for hosting this for us. I really appreciate that. And thank everyone for coming. The Shem Center for Interfaith Spirituality new website is up for anyone who wants to check it out. It's still being worked on, but there's a lot of new stuff in there, and it's shemcenter.org, simply SHEMCENTER.org. And then Niels, your website is up too. How do we get to that? That's
Aboon.org, ABWOON.org. You will find it.
I have a request. I was wondering if we could end with Neil just reading through the prayer once all together for us.
Will do.
Thank you.
And Neil, before you do that, just everybody knows that for everybody who registered, we have your email. An email will go out to you with a link to the recording of this retreat so you can watch it again. A link to the Shem Center website, to Neil's website, and to the music that we heard. So those will all be resources available to you.
Thank you.
And it also will be on YouTube?
It is being recorded on YouTube, and it's the St. Mark's YouTube channel. So you just search, Laura, can you tell us how to find it?
Thank you.
You just search for St. Mark's Episcopal Glen Ellen, but I can, let me
We'll put
grab
that in the email too.
Yeah, that's easier. And I'm going to put my email in the chat real quick. If for some reason you didn't get the icon or you didn't get the handout, shoot me an email. I will happily send you everything.
And I'm wondering if Neil could sing it all the way through for us, or at least put that on the tape so that we can hear it at some point.
You can go to my website for that, but that's a little too fast, and some people have to leave. Well, I want to just say thanks to Laura, thanks to George, and of course, thank you to Joe, and thanks to all of you. And 2 points before I say the prayer and we click on leave, because we don't actually leave. Jesus encouraged his disciples also to pray without words when he said, pray b'sheme, pray with my shem, with my atmosphere, with my feeling. So this leaves the door open for just feeling, you could say, with your heart, that connection. In Aramaic, there's only one word for prayer and for meditation. There's only one word for prayer and meditation. So he wasn't necessarily saying words all the time when he prayed. And the other is most of his meetings with people happened outdoors in nature. They weren't in buildings. Go figure. So that also has a lot to do with his teaching. So let's breathe together with the sound Abun. Feel that within our hearts, opening our breath, opening our hearts, opening our feeling to source, making space for that in our lives. Avun diba shemaya, nitqad shemoch, tete mal kutach, nechwe sibianach aikana, diba shemaya afbaad ah, poblan lachama de sun kana nyamana, washbuklan chaubain wachtahain, aikana dafchanan shwachan l'hayavein. Wela tachlan l'nisyuna, ela patsan min bisha, metul de lache malkuta, wachela, wateshbuchta, lalam almin. Amen. Amen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks,
Stay
everyone.
safe.
Thank you so much. It was so great to see you, Sadi. And
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, friends.
Thank you.
Sadie.
We'll leave the room.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Tom and Carolyn.
Thank you, Neil.
I heard it's bad to wave on Zoom, so I'm not waving.
You all.
Bye-bye.
Why would it be bad to wave on Zoom?
I don't know, you know.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, George. I think George scarpered already. He had to leave.
Yes.
So
Yes, he's got to get
greetings
to
from Scotland, where we have spring.
Thank
maybe coming. Thanks. Thanks,
and
everybody.
everybody's invited to the ordination that we're having at 2, which is what he has scampered off to.
At 3 o'clock.
Ah.
At 3.
I'm still here.
Sorry.
Still here.
I'm still here. The ordination is at 3 o'clock.
We're all invited. It's wonderful.
Bye,
It's gonna be
Joe.
great.
Bye.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.